I have to talk to him about that.
Would you do that?
Good morning. There's Reverend Newbill, just in time. Haven't even called it to order. Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll begin a little bit out of order from the published agenda and start with a, do I have musical accompaniment? Where's that coming from?
Not me.
Is that you, Councilman?
No, sir.
We're going to start with the published agenda item 2, which is a publicly noticed rate hearing. So I would call that meeting to order. Let's see, there we go. Call the public hearing meeting to order. And I'll recognize Ryan Wanamaker, our CFO, for a presentation to the board on the proposed rate.
Thank
Good morning,
you.
Mr. Wanamaker.
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Great, thank you.
Excellent. Good morning. Staff is recommending several modifications to our electric rate tariffs that will allow for the implementation and continuation of 2 strategic initiatives that align to our 4 measures of value, our residential demand rate pilot and our Solar Max program. In your packet, you've been provided clean and redline copies of the affected tariff sheets, but I'll summarize those changes as well. The first proposed change is related to our residential demand rate pilot. As we discussed at our January board meeting, we're rolling this pilot out this summer. It provides a platform for customer choice and provides bill stability. It's a culmination of nearly 5 years of work by a team of over 100 people at JEA. Based on the research and findings that we've seen from the first phase of the pilot, we're recommending several changes to the program as we get ready to move to the next phase of the pilot this summer. These include changing the name of the rate from smart savings to flex pricing, as well as changing the intervals that the demand will be measured and billed on, and adding an additional rate structure to test in the second phase of the pilot. So on this slide, you can see a summary of those proposed changes from the current demand rate that we have been testing. The proposed flex pricing rates will be based on 60-minute demand intervals instead of a 15-minute interval that is in place today. In the focus groups, this was perceived by customers to be more fair and was found to it was found to be easier to understand for our customers as well. Among the 2 rates, the dual flex pricing will continue to have the same time-based component that our current residential demand rate has. And the daily flex pricing will remove those peak charges and is based on the customer's average daily peak instead of throughout the billing cycle, as opposed to the customer's single peak throughout the billing cycle. I'll note that these rates are designed to cover the same cost of service as our current rate structure. The second proposed change that we have today is to our Solar Max program.
Let me just interrupt you. Did any board members have questions on the first proposed rate change? The dual flex pricing or the smart solar? Any questions about that specifically? Hey, let me just make sure I heard what you said. This is not a revenue enhancement change.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you. No economic impact to the consumer. Go ahead.
That's correct. The second proposed change is to our Solar Max program. This program has been in place for a couple of years. It drives both environmental value and community impact value. It's set to expire at the end of September. This option provides large customers with the opportunity to participate alongside JEA in solar development within the JEA service territory, so making solar more available for all of our customers. Staff is requesting that we remove the expiration date, which will allow for the rider to remain in place and open to large customers as our new solar centers come online in the coming years. A little bit of detail about the program itself. Many large companies have made a push in recent years to reduce their carbon footprint by investing in renewable energy sources. Through our conversations with many of these companies in partnership with JAX USA and the Chamber, we designed this program to allow customers to participate alongside of us. And so this program is available to customers who are requesting a minimum of 7 million kilowatt hours of solar energy annually. And so for some context, that's equivalent to the annual energy output of about a 4 to 5 megawatt of solar panels. Under this program, the customer has the ability to enter into an agreement for 5 or 10-year term to purchase a specified percent of their monthly energy from specified JEA solar sources. We expect this program to become more popular as the new solar installations come online and over the next several years. So again, pending the outcome of the public rate hearing, staff is recommending the board adopt these changes to the electric rate tariff. All of the proposed changes would be effective June 1st, 2019. So be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wanamaker. Questions from the board? Ms. Johnson?
No, thank you.
Ms. Green?
No.
Reverend Newbill? Ms. Flanagan? How many customers are now participating in the Solar Max program?
So we don't have any customers on it at this time. I will tell you that we've had a number of conversations with several large companies that are based here who have expressed interest in participating in the program along with our new solar farms come online. They're interested in participating in those.
Well, I suspect that as more and more of our corporate customers adopt green goals as part of their corporate platform, that we'll see an increased demand. So I support this. Is there a motion to adopt the staff's recommendation and resolution 2019-01?
So
I'll take that as a motion from Reverend Newbill and a second from Ms. Johnson. Any other discussion? Let me pause the vote and open the floor for any public comment. Any members of the public wish to be heard on the proposed solar resolutions? None? No discussion?
May I ask a question?
Councilman Schellenberg, yes.
To the chair, to Mr. Watermack. I noticed that none of these are in the south part of the river. Is there a reason for this? The identify potential, there's no
Talking about the
position.
solar
The
farm?
solar
Right.
farms themselves?
Right.
So these are the solar farms that we have announced so far to date.
Right.
Part of that is frankly driven by the cost of land and
Okay.
availability of land.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to participate, you can't really do it on the south side of the river.
Oh, sure you can.
So any company in Jacksonville can participate in the Solar Max program as long as they have the 7 million kilowatt hour minimum threshold. And it's essentially what we'll do is so all of these are connected into our system, and so we will designate the kilowatt hours specifically from that solar farm that they elect to participate in to that customer.
Do you
But
mind if
not
I-
running a wire to
Right.
the solar farm, it's just part of our generating
part of
fleet,
our-
isn't it?
Yeah, it's part of our system.
Can I ask two more questions potentially? So you identified all the big users of this, of your system kilowatt, and you sent them a note saying, hey, would you like to participate? And these, most of them, as I see, none of them came from the south of the river. Is that correct? You must have some companies that
There's
actually.
no customer currently using the solar
Right, no,
Max.
but you haven't identified any in the south side. The question is, all the people that use the amount of kilowatts that you currently have they been notified to participate in this project?
So we have a commercial, a key accounts area that specifically with all of these customers speaks to them on a regular basis and makes them aware of programs just like this and many more, frankly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Chair.
Do you want to add anything?
No, just Councilman, the map that you're seeing is the map of our actual installations, not the customers themselves.
Okay.
That's why.
Any other questions or comments on the proposed changes to the solar tariffs? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, that concludes the, thank you, Mr. Wanamaker. That concludes the public hearing on the changes to the tariff. We now call to order, sir? It was one resolution, right? 2019-01 carried both?
Right.
Yep. Sure. So we'll now call to order the regular board meeting. And I'd like to ask everyone to stand for a moment of reflection, followed by a pledge to the flag. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have an agenda that's been presented. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Yeah. And thank you. Is there a second? Reverend Newell? I'd like to ask for an amendment to the agenda to reflect that the Finance and Audit Committee lacked a quorum, and so under Roman numeral 8, we've got items 1 and 2, which are presented as action. Those will just be information. We'll defer approval of their agenda and minutes to their subsequent meeting. And under Roman numeral 8A11, the program assessment is denominated as information. It will be an action item for the board because that's in the nature of an audit regarding our cybersecurity audit contract in regard to our cybersecurity program, which requires board action. So I'd like to ask for a motion to amend the agenda to reflect those changes under 8A. So moved. Thank you, Reverend Newbill. Thank you, Ms. Green. Any questions on the amendments? Have a vote on the amended agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Carries unanimously. And now, any discussion on the agenda as amended? No. Ask for all in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Carries unanimously. Okay, thank you. Whew, that was harder than it should have been. Safety briefing from our new liaison from the Office of General Counsel, Lasikia Hodges. I'm sorry, not safety briefing, sunshine. You've got sunshine.
That's right, I have sunshine. Good morning. I'm going to read the statement into the record. This meeting is being held in compliance with Florida's government and the Sunshine Law, Section 286.011 Florida statutes, and shall be open to the public at all times. Official acts of the JEA Board may be conducted at this meeting that will be considered binding on the JEA. Reasonable notice has been provided, and minutes of this meeting shall be taken and promptly recorded.
Thank you, Lasikia. Safety briefing, Mr. Zahn.
Good morning. I hope everybody's doing well and has had their coffee. So safety is a core value, or it's one of our number one cultural value. And to that end, in the event of an emergency, can I have a volunteer for dialing 911? John McCarthy, and for doing CPR? Melissa Dykes. Please identify the person to your right as your safety buddy, and in the event that we need to depart, use the stairs to the left of the elevators, walk in an orderly fashion using the handrail down to the lobby, and cross Church and Main, and we'll convene there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zahn. Agenda calls for any comments from the public, members of the public. Do we have any yellow cards, Latrice? No. Okay, wow, wonderful. Councilman Schellenberg.
I'm good. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next is item 5A, the consent agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. We're now up to 5B. Ms. Dykes, good morning.
Good morning.
Monthly financials and operations dashboard, please.
Okay. The dashboard is included in your packet, and in usual format, what I'll do as I go through this dashboard is not talk about each item individually. I'll highlight some of our areas of outstanding performance and areas where we're going to be challenged for this fiscal year. And I'll start in the conversation with our estimated time of restoration accuracy, which is about halfway down the first section of metrics here on customer value. ETR accuracy is just one element of outage communication with our customers. It is very much on track for this year, and in fact was one of the reasons that JEA was recently recognized by Chartwell as Chartwell's 2019 Outage Communication Silver Award for mid-sized utilities. So we're very proud to have received that award. And that's in part reflected by the metrics that you see on this dashboard here. The remainder of the metrics in the customer value section are all green, and they're all green by a wide margin. We're providing really terrific reliability to our customers in both systems during this fiscal year. In the area of financial value, we've talked in previous board meetings about the second metric there, which is generation fleet reliability. We are not going to make that metric for this year. And we're not going to make it because of some unexpected occurrences at our Northside 2 unit, just under 300 megawatts. That unit is currently off for planned maintenance. They've got an expansion joint replacement that they're working on. So the good news is we think we'll be able to bring it back up successfully and avoid the issues that we've had for the beginning of the year. The bad news is we never found the smoking gun. And so while we're hopeful that we'll be able to bring it back up successfully and avoid some of those problems we've had in the early part of the year, we'll have to wait and see how that unit performs when we bring it back up out of our outage. So I'll be reporting out on that in future board meetings. The next line there is also flagged as a challenge for the year, and this is percentage of net O&M budget. We provided ourselves a goal for the year of coming in at 95% of our budget. We're currently at 98%, so we are moving in a good direction. That has ticked down from last month, but we are going to continue to be challenged on the budget front because of a number of one-time items and because of our bargaining unit contracts, which are quite expensive. Under community impact value, flag the JSEB spend for this year. We set ourselves a stretch goal for JSEB spend for the year that exceeded the requirement under the city ordinance. And we are on track to make that stretch goal, which is great news. We are, in fact, this week putting out a solicitation for the septic tank phase-out work. We had hoped to be able to shelter a portion of that work, but unfortunately, we're not able to identify enough JSEB plumbers to be able to shelter the work. However, there is a percentage of JSEB work that's designated within that solicitation that'll continue to help push that number up for the year. And lastly, within our environmental value, nitrogen continues to just be an outstanding performance for the year. We are expecting at year end to come in well under 500 tons, and now as of this month, we're sitting on the lowest rolling 12 months of nitrogen discharged to the river ever in the history of JEA. So it's just outstanding environmental performance. Any questions on any of the other metrics for the year?
Any questions from the board on the state? Ms. Flanagan.
Could I ask you, Ms. Dykes, just to remind the board on the FEMA reimbursement, what the typical timeline is in terms of reimbursement?
Years.
That's a great question, and there's no typical. It really depends on staffing and turnaround time and the number of storms and workload, and it has been as long as almost a decade in terms of reimbursements. And so this is not unusual that it would take as long as it's taken for us to be reimbursed.
We did, however, receive some FEMA reimbursement on Matthew in the last month.
Right. Other questions? Is there anything to be done, and maybe this is better directed to Mr. McCarthy, is there anything to be done about increasing the opportunities for JSEB? You referenced the inability to shelter some of our phase-out contracts because of the lack of sufficient qualified JSEB plumbers. It's frustrating that we're making these efforts and not able to tap into that.
It is frustrating, although sometimes the story is a good one. For example, we've had recent instances where we've just had too many companies graduate from the JSEB program, which is what the program's designed to do. So sometimes there's good nuggets that are hidden within the challenges that we have. We have really focused on outreach this year, and so we've very deliberately scheduled workshops, and we've done outreach within the community to try to make sure that we communicate with anybody that could be eligible to participate as a JSEB, how they get registered as a JSEB, and then the opportunities that are coming up. And we'll continue to focus on outreach to try to bridge that gap.
Thank you. I was just channeling Reverend Newbill. I asked before he did.
No, I think the JSAP program is going well, especially with the outreach that John and his staff has done. And a lot of people in the community who would have been a part of it were afraid of it because of so much paperwork. Mm-hmm. And John and I had a conversation, and he opened some doors where people could actually talk with someone who could really help them to deal with that. So, there's been a lot of positive input from the community as it relates to JSAP, and a lot of people just didn't know. Mm-hmm. So that information is now getting to the community. So
great
job well done.
Yeah, many thanks to Mr. McCarthy and his staff for the public outreach and education efforts. Thank you. Any other questions of Ms. Dykes on the operations dashboard? Anything else, Ms. Dykes?
That's it. Thank you.
Chair will recognize Mr. Wanamaker. ADR, please.
So for those of you who have been on this board for a couple of years, you're probably expecting to see your workout equipment with these giant binders. I'm happy to report these documents are going to be electronically distributed this year, and those will be available to you on your Board Books app immediately following today's meeting. So the board wellness program will have to be modified. The JEA is required to file with the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board our annual disclosure reports each year. Those are required to meet our continuing disclosure requirements with our banks and our bondholders. Board members have certain responsibilities with respect to these ADRs, and they are, I will reinforce that board members are not required to read every sentence of every page. Board members are required, however, to meet the requirements set by the Securities and Exchange Commission, including that a public official may not authorize disclosure that the public official knows to be materially false or misleading, and may not authorize disclosure while recklessly disregarding facts that indicate that there is a risk that the disclosure may be misleading. And forgive me, I'm reading directly from verbatim from our attorneys on this.
The lawyers insist you do that.
That's right. Board members are also requested to do an elephant in the room evaluation. If members of the board are aware of pressing financial or operating issues, then you're responsible for knowing how those issues are disclosed to investors before authorizing bond offering or disclosure documents. There are certain steps that board members can take to protect themselves and to ensure that our disclosure policies, our disclosure is adequate to investors. The most important of which is to make sure that staff has policies and procedures in place to govern the preparation of these disclosure documents, and that those policies and procedures have been adhered to. That policy is reviewed with the Finance and Audit Committee every year, once a year, and it was reviewed with the Finance and Audit Committee at the last meeting. There's a memo signed by me to the committee members that attests that the procedures were adhered to in the preparation of these documents specifically. And we'll be asking board members to approve these documents at the board meeting coming up next month. So if there are any questions that board members have about the disclosure documents, we have carved out time over the next month to meet with staff, or whenever it's convenient for board members over that time period. We can take questions between now and next month as part of the approval process. That concludes the presentation on the annual disclosure reports.
Thank you, Mr. Wanamaker. As a securities lawyer, it's incumbent upon me to emphasize that this is really important stuff. So to that end, the board has previously adopted a policy that requires education and training regarding the annual disclosure report and your responsibilities, our responsibilities as a board concerning that compliance obligation. We have explored with our bond counsel some potential dates for that training over the next month in advance of our April board meeting, where we'll be asked to approve the ADR. Latrice is going to send out an email asking the board for their availability for that training. It's an hour and a half max, where the bond counsel fly in and work with the board to make sure we understand that. So I would ask you, when you receive the email from Latrice, please respond promptly to your availability, and we'll pick the date that's best for the most number of board members so we can get that discharged. And worst case scenario, we tack it on to our special meeting April 2 next week. Thank you, Mr. Wanamaker. Appreciate it. We look forward to our workout materials. Not really. Next up is the fiscal year 2019 operating budget line item transfers. You're still on deck.
I'm still here. You guys had a break from me, I think, last month, and I'm making up for it this month.
I see.
So the next item is an action item related to the implementation of the new contribution agreement and our STAR plan that was previously authorized by the board. I'm happy to report that last month we executed phase 1 of our STAR plan. and paid off an additional $195 million of debt. As you know, we also finalized the extension of the contribution agreement with the help of our counterparts at City Hall and City Council. As part of the agreement, we're funding $15 million for additional septic tank phase-out. The implementation of these items, both the STAR plan and the septic tank phase-out, requires FY19 budgetary transfers. And you may recall that in the October board meeting, the board approved a resolution which authorized the managing director and CEO to make certain transfers within the budget. Transfers in excess of $5 million during the fiscal year are required to be brought back to the board of directors for action, ratification after the fact. And so due to the size of these items and in compliance with the board's resolution, we're bringing these transfers back to the board for ratification.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions regarding these line item transfers in excess of the previously authorized limit? I have a motion to, no questions. I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Reverend Newbill. Second by Ms. Green. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? Approved, Mr. Wanamaker.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now the chair would recognize Mr. McInall. Although I was traveling, I was interested to read about our real estate optimization program in the newspaper.
Yeah, they did a good job on that.
I did.
In fact, I'm just going to read the story.
Please. Is that David or Will's? Whose story was that?
I think it was on OKV.
It was David's. David's back there to take credit.
Yeah.
Mr. McInall.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Here to present the Real Estate Optimization Initiative. This initiative started back in August of 2018, and it's really driven by our pervasive commitment to value and profitability. And what we're doing here is trying to monetize our non-core assets by selling, leasing, partnering, or developing property in order to really maximize the return. And this really hits both our customer, community, and financial values. So this presentation is just for information. What I want to do is highlight the properties we're talking about, run through the process, and then each of these properties are in excess of the value that would require board approval on a specific basis. So we'd bring approval for any sale back to the board. So the four initial properties we're looking at are this property, the downtown complex here. Talleyrand, it's part of our Kennedy generating station. Property on Atlantic and South Side, it's the former Coggin auto dealer. We picked that up as part of our Total Water Management Plan pipeline project. And property out in the Cecil Commerce Center that we had acquired for a water facility and a substation. Additional properties are going to become available later as we finish with the demolition and remediation of St. Johns River Power Park and subdivide that and make that available for redevelopment. So just a quick look at the overall value that we see. The estimated sales price we're looking at between 40 to 65 million, compared to a book value of 32 million. So we certainly do see a profit to be made on the sales, as well as returning some of these properties to more productive use than just as vacant land, or certainly great potential to put them back on the city tax rolls. So the process, first we do an appraisal, and that's underway at the Atlantic Boulevard site. Then we offer the properties to other governmental agencies, and that can be another city agency or state agency. If they're interested, they would be obligated to buy it at the appraised price. So we're trying to get a really good appraisal. If no government agency is interested, then we would go through a public bid process, formal opening and award, and then board would approve any sales over $500,000. If for some reason the sale price is lower than the assessed value, then we would require both board and city council approval. And just a quick look at each of these properties. So the former Coggin Auto Dealership, we acquired that in 2011. So there's a few different ways that we acquired, that we have this surplus property, and this is one of them where we acquired it for a specific purpose. That purpose is complete. We're going to reserve an easement on the, I think, the west side of it for the pipeline, and the rest of it's going to be made available for sale. This is another way we pick up property. So we acquired a large parcel, carved off a couple of pieces for the water plant up on the north side and the substation on the south side. Leaves quite a bit left over, about 250 acres. 60 acres of that is conservation, so there's still a substantial parcel there that would be attractive to a developer. Everybody knows about this block, but there's actually three properties here. We've got the 21 West Church Street, the tower and the CC building, the garage across the street, and the motor pool down the block, 21 East Church. And finally, Kennedy. So in this case, we're still using the property. We've carved off the part that we're not. There used to be quite a few other generating units out here that have been long decommissioned. Kennedy 7 and 8 are along the northern border. And we have some warehouse space up towards the edge. There's a dock there that remains in use. So pretty much we keep the switch yards, the tank farm, the other facilities, but we free up a lot of space otherwise. This is a very good location because of the water and rail access for it. So in conclusion, we expect to generate really over $100 million once we bring in Power Park and the other properties beyond these first four. The first four, as we noted, are about $40 to $65 million. And we also see a reduction in our O&M and carry costs of about $1 million a year by discharging these properties. And we're looking at a simple return on assets of at least 25%. And that concludes the
Fantastic.
presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Magnol. Questions? Mr. Johnson? Ms. Green?
As exciting as it sounds to generate more than $100 million, I have to ask, is there any other use that we could have utilized this additional land?
Well, that is the first thing that we review. So as we identify a property as surplus, we look internally for other uses. There are some that we're going to reserve for potential future well sites. Certainly, we just went through a pretty large land acquisition for the solar farms, and part of the next round of properties would be any land that's might be left over once we complete the solar development. So we do look and see if there's an internal use for it. Mm-hmm. In the case of like Power Park, we might think, okay, could we put a solar farm out there? But really, that's not the highest and best use. That property is too valuable for a solar farm. We could put a solar farm elsewhere on lower cost land and achieve the higher value for the land at Power Park, because it's waterfront, it's got dock access, it's got rail access. It's really a prime logistical access location, and it's got some very large parcels. There are more attractive parcels for like solar development elsewhere. We do intend to retain part of it for a potential future generating station, a combined cycle or such. That'd be maybe 40, 50 acres, but really, that's due to its proximity to transmission assets. So, we do look at that. That's sort of our first review.
All right, thank you.
Great question. Reverend Newbill, any questions regarding the disposition of real estate? Ms. Flanagan?
The $100 million from the conclusion slide as compared to slide 4 of the...
I'm including the Power Park.
Okay, thank you.
I'm curious, any of these proposed initial sales involve any demolition costs or environmental cleanup costs? Anything associated with readying the property for sale?
No, pretty much that's net of demolition or reading values. Like for, I think, for instance, the Coggin property, there could be a demolition of that building, but somebody could want it with the building in place, and we think the estimate we put there, reflects the value of the building, as is. A couple of them are vacant. On the Kennedy site, there are some environmental issues on that property, and the price we place on that includes really transferring the environmental liability to the seller. So that's why it might be a little lower than even you might get if it were pristine property.
Appraised value discounted for the environmental remediation.
Right.
Okay. This is not an action item, just for information. Anybody have any additional questions of Mr. McEnroe? Thank you. I appreciate you and your team's hard work on this. Anytime you look at your balance sheet and see some hidden value, trap value, it's a great initiative to unlock and tap into that value. So kudos to you under Mrs. Zahn's leadership to explore this.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Okay, and that brings us up to Roman numeral 7 on the agenda. Mr. Zahn.
Certainly, I'm going to ask that Melissa and Ryan join me. And so, subject matter exploration for this month, what we thought would be a really good opportunity is to review where we've all been for the last year. And
Do you have to revisit all of it?
No, we don't. No, we don't. But, in the vein of, if you recall, Chairman Howard, in the CEO interviews, you asked me about trust and trust with the community. And my response to you was that we're going to tell people what we're going to do, and then we're going to come back and tell them we did it. So this year in review is our hope to start a tradition, certainly as we're transitioning chairs, to be able to reflect upon not only the accomplishments of the team and also some of the failures, because we're going to fail along the way, but also to share with the board and some of the things that you all have been a part of in decision making, and to because it always helps to remember where you came from as you're moving forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Dykes.
Do I have are you going to click for me?
Go for it.
Okay. For the past year, we've really focused on execution. And we've done that both through our leadership transition and then while setting the foundation for a corporate strategy since that transition was complete. I've got the great privilege of reporting out this morning on what we've done over the past year. Beginning in April of 2018, we started with stopping a painful conversation and starting a reorganization process of our senior leadership team. We also, in May, then revised our board meeting structure, and we did it with an eye for transparency. So it created a structure that very deliberately allows for subject matter exploration by the board and creates 3 separate sections in the board agenda. We then in June of 2018, the cooling towers at SJRPP were retired, which was so symbolically important for all of our employees, and most especially those employees of the St. Johns River Power Park. We also started our management listening tours. In July, we introduced the concept of the dark fiber utility services for the 22nd century smart city, and we ramped up our septic tank phase-out efforts, including a commitment to studying innovative ways to deliver infrastructure solutions to areas of our community most in need. That summer, we also held our first employee appreciation event at Jumbo Shrimp, which was so well received that we plan on repeating that employee appreciation event next year as well. In September, we launched our solicitation process for our new JEA headquarters, and I can't tell you how excited I am about next week's meeting, which wraps up a very long journey for some of us on our headquarters. And then in September, we engaged McKinsey to really kick off our strategic planning process. The year was not without its challenges, though. Most notably, our S&P downgrade, they're downgraded of all the Plant Vogel participants, followed by a downgrade from Moody's. The good news is Fitch did affirm our ratings over that same time period. And then in October, we hosted our first ever Innovation Summit, and we sent more than 150 employees to the Panhandle to assist with restoration after Hurricane Michael. Following our downgrade, I'm kind of sorry this wasn't on the previous page. Following our downgrade, within days of our downgrade, we were able to increase our revolving credit facility from $300 million to $500 million. There was also a straw ballot in the fall of last year that required a voter referendum for any sale of JEA, and that our charter was subsequently modified to reflect the straw ballot language. In November, we have our permanent CEO in place. And then in December, the board approved our STAR plan, the Strategic and Timely Asset Realignment, best acronym ever, which is a plan to pay off an additional $1 billion of debt by 2023. In January, the board adopted our guiding principles and approved the JEA total compensation philosophy to really set the foundation for our strategic planning going forward. February, City Council unanimously approved our contribution agreement extension for 2 additional years. And then we executed agreements for 250 megawatts of solar PPAs, which will place Jacksonville on the map as a solar leader in this country. In March, we executed our very first gas prepay transaction, which is going to save our customers more than $1 million a year. And most recently, we finalized our senior leadership team, as you'll hear more about throughout this presentation. We did all of this while delivering the lowest 12 months of nitrogen ever to the river, and the highest electric reliability to our customers ever, as measured by CME5. So it was a great operating year. Just a quick recap on the finance side. Sorry to steal some of your thunder. But over the past year, in the energy system, we've maintained excellent financial and operational metrics. We repaid $326 million of debt in 2018. We accelerated another $100 million of debt in February of 2019. We continued to strategically plan around Plant Vogtle and absorb those costs. Our capital program is almost $900 million over the next 5 years. Electric rates remain at the median in the state. And in fact, our residential rates on the electric system are 15% below the national average, which we're really proud of. And as I mentioned, we closed the St. John's River Power Park, which that one closure reduced our carbon footprint by 30% and saves $50 million in operating expenses every year. On the water side, our financial metrics remain a fortress. The water system is absolutely a darling from a financial perspective. We've got a strong balance sheet, ample liquidity, debt service coverage of between 3.5 and 4 times over the next 5 years. We repaid $74 million in debt in 2018 and an additional $95 million in debt in February of 2019. We've got a $1 billion capital program over the next 5 years, which will continue operating that water and wastewater system at best-in-class levels, and we launched our integrated water resource plan. So all of that performance helped drive JEA's leadership position in the state and in the country in water and wastewater.
So year of results. Melissa did steal a lot of my thunder, but it's okay. It's never a bad thing to talk about it. So in FY 2018, JEA continued to deliver outstanding financial results. Our debt service coverage, liquidity, and debt to asset ratios continued to be strong and are consistent with financial credit metrics of a AA utility. Our liquidity provides the ability to invest in energy and water infrastructure without new debt, and our debt to asset ratios continue to improve and approach our long-term targets. These next 2 slides are right from our rating agency presentation, and it's sort of a report card of sorts for each of the businesses. On the energy side, we look at what we said in December of 2017 versus what we did in fiscal year 2018. I'm happy to report on the energy side, we got straight A's. We beat every single projection of our key financial metrics. It was a great year. On the water side, also posted excellent results. As Melissa mentioned, we had extremely strong debt service coverage. Liquidity results were very good, while cash funding over $200 million, or approximately $200 million of water and sewer infrastructure with no new debt.
So the reflection is, if you look back on the last year, you have an energy business that's playing a bit of defense, and we're doing all of the strategic things that you would do in a company that are within our control as management to position the business for all the change that we've talked about in our subject matter explorations around distributed generation and demand side management and our customer behavior, our demand rate or our flex fuel rate. The water business continues to be a leader, and we hope it'll continue to lead well into the future and be a leader in the state, especially as the state is starting to look at water quality and water supply issues at an elevated level. To that end, our team has, I think, adopted one of what we think is an interesting prelude to where we're going.
Again, this is the USS Montana requesting that you immediately divert your course 15 degrees to the north to avoid a collision. Over.
Please divert your course 15 degrees to the south to avoid collision.
This is Captain Hancock. You will divert your course. Over.
Negative, Captain. I'm not moving anything. Change your course. Over.
Sir, this is the USS Montana, the second largest vessel in the North Atlantic Fleet. You will change course 15 degrees north, or I will be forced to take measures to ensure the safety of this ship. Over.
This is the lighthouse, mate. It's your call.
The lighthouse.
Hello.
It's a helpful reminder that no matter how strong you are, no matter how leading a position you have, it's oftentimes very helpful to understand your heading. And to that end, if you recall, one of the things that I think is extremely unique about JEA as a public entity is in August we passed a strategic framework. And what that did was it established 4 basic measures of value that allow for us to start truly being able to navigate and be able to express in an open and transparent way what the heading of the business is. And hopefully we can, also deal with the challenges that we've talked a lot about over the last year and do it in a way that's methodical, rational, and transparent for everyone to understand with the simple messages that we're putting out. On improving lives, to that end, on the guiding principle, you'll notice that improving in lives and accelerating innovation, as well as our mission statement, have dramatically changed. We have not deviated from some of the core competencies, such as working together to elevate the entire team, because while we understand that we are now a customer-focused or customer-first organization, we do understand that our employees are our most valuable asset with regards to delivering that value to the customer. The difference, though, is that, as we've talked about, our next 10 years, both on the water side and on the energy side, are not like our last 10 years, and they are certainly not like our last 125 years. We will be seeing significantly more change in our behind the meter than ever before, and that is something that, as an organization, we need to prepare for now, even though those trends are just now starting to pick up. If you recall, we spent quite a bit of time talking about the impacts of distributed generation on our service territory and how it's been growing at well over 50% year over year since 2014. On February 6th, 2019, we had our first house in Southside Jacksonville that filed an interconnect for a little over 10 kilowatts of solar and 40 kilowatts of battery, effectively removing them from the grid. So we are still seeing the trends. They are not decelerating on us, and we as an organization need to be prepared. To that end, I set 5 major priorities for the business in 2019. And we're going to take a little bit of time to dive into each one of those priorities because they are more than just window dressing. They are literally where we are putting our time and our resources and our focus as a management team. So with that, on priority 1, but before we move on to priority 1, I do want to stop for a moment because there are points of concern. As with anything, as a management team, I believe our job is not only to tell you the things that we have done, to admit failure when we've failed, to come back and propose solutions when we have problems, but also to elevate points of concern. These points of concern are concern that our entire senior leadership team continues to think about on a daily basis. Maintaining alignment. Certainly this board spends a lot of time thinking about alignment with its management team, specifically with its CEO and with each other. Our alignment with our city council. I appreciate the liaisons. You show up every meeting. You have thoughtful discourse. But as you're well aware, I've spent quite a bit of time with the city council. I've now met with them over 60 times in the last year to talk to them about the issues of JEA, where we're headed, be able to ensure that they, as major stakeholders in the community, are in alignment with the shareholder framework and with our guiding principles, and that they understand some of the things that we're doing. Time is not our friend, though. Time to a pivot, especially when you have declining sales on the energy side and you have some significant pressures on the water, is critical. So we will continue to execute at the same way going forward as Ms. Dykes elaborated at the beginning. As you know, culture, we are in the 4th quartile. It is a massive point of concern for us. If our customers are only going to be served by our employees and our culture is in the 4th quartile, then what that means is we are going to struggle going forward in terms of being able to shape the market and be able to be a major player. It's why we're spending quite a bit of time and energy and resources focused on culture. And access to capital, the city council and community engagement and inclusiveness in terms of the path forward, as we've talked a lot about, and as the city council and their subcommittee talked about last year, we are going to need to talk about charter changes, especially if we're going to do behind the meter activity. There's significant issues that will have private entities concerned about those elements. And so we'll need to need to continue this inclusiveness going forward, this transparent way of communicating, and continuing to seek counsel and have good common discourse. And to that end, also Vogel. We continue to try and find areas of common ground and try and resolve an issue that candidly is going to weigh on us for the foreseeable future. And with that, I'm going to stop joking and hand it to Ms. Dykes.
We start with culture in terms of strategic priorities.
Excuse me, Ms. Dykes, is there a question?
Question. What impact does it have an impact of the energy department decision the other day with Plant Vogel? How does that impact us moving forward, or does it impact us moving forward?
So it does not change the analysis that that we have completed and discussed at the board level. It was anticipated. The reality is that in order to complete that facility, that will probably not be the last amount of debt that is going to be required. We're waiting on an update from Georgia Power that we had expected an update on in terms of schedule and project costs at estimate at completion in February. That was postponed, I believe, till August, July or August?
Yeah, the next filing is August.
To August of this year. That'll be a more significant milestone for us to understand.
Thank you, Revenue Bill. Ms. Dykes.
We start with culture as our first priority very deliberately in terms of rank order, because our ability to be successful in setting the stage for our culture forms the foundation for whether we'll be successful in executing our strategy. And our culture, it's an interesting sort of challenge to put to the leadership team, because we have spectacular employees. We have incredible employees who are dedicated in ways that are hard to quantify unless you've really seen it in person. And maybe the best example of really seeing dedication that our employees have is during the storm restoration. To see the way that these people go so far above and beyond to do really heroic things in dangerous conditions and challenging conditions for our community is really a demonstration of who our employees are at their core, and that many of our employees consider their work to be a higher calling. And so our challenge from a cultural perspective is to give them the tools and the foundation and the environment and the vision to be able to take that energy and coalesce it into a culture that can help propel this organization forward. And most specifically around the changes that this business is facing. It is a very different business than it was 10 or 20 years ago. We start with a foundation of values, and our cultural values, the first 5 here are ones that we've had for years. So safety, service, growth squared, which simply means personal growth and growth of the business. Accountability and integrity have been with us for a long time. This past year, we added a 6th value very deliberately for ideas, to recognize that ideas and innovation are going to be key to our success in such a rapidly changing external environment. To distill down our challenge as a culture, the biggest challenge we have is to transition from a culture that's working not to fail to one that's driving to success. For 125 years, on the energy side of the business, the most important thing that we were focused on was keeping the lights on and the beer cold. It was when you're growing predictably at 3% a year, you don't have to be obsessively worried about financial performance of the business because your growth is built in. What you do have to be obsessively worried about is ensuring high reliability. And that is really what formed the foundation of our culture that works not to fail. It's a culture that's very risk averse. The transition that's required culturally is for us to be focused on driving towards success, which does mean taking very measured, mitigated, calculated risks, but understanding taking some risks in order to drive to success and being willing to accept some failures along the way. That is a huge mindset shift and a huge culture shift, and it's one of our biggest challenges. Building an adaptive and adaptable culture matters because there's a whole body of research that clearly indicates that that when you focus on culture, you drive value for an organization. So by improving adaptability, by improving retention, engagement, alignment, and a sense of corporate identity, culture improvements clearly drive an increase in value for the entire business.
So with that we come to priority 2, which candidly as a public entity is something that a lot of our community and our employees, when we first put it out there, had an interesting response to, which is this pervasive commitment to value creation and profitability. And the reality is that the management team of JEA historically said we're not-for-profit, therefore we have no profit. Well, with over $4 billion in debt, and actually if you look back in 2012, we had over about $6.5 billion in debt. You need to have a profit in order to return capital to your investors. And the issue was that if you were not focused on the bottom line performance of the business, perhaps, as we have seen with energy efficiency and distributed generation, that trend on profitability declines, and what you see is a management team start to take reactive measures like shutting down SJRPP, like accelerating debt in order to make room for rates, which are all defensive moves that you do when you're faced with declining sales, because it's the appropriate thing to be able to, when you need to get out of your leveraged environment as fast as you possibly can. So to that end, though, and it brings you back to the battleship analogy, which is having 4 basic measures to determine your heading. Understanding that not all decisions will actually maximize or even increase any one of these 4 measures, or all 4 measures at the same time, but at times you, as an organization, need to make a trade-off. And sometimes you trade off financial value to increase customer value. Sometimes you trade off environmental value to reduce nitrogen discharge to the river. You might actually make a significant investment that doesn't have a penciled return, but you know it's the right thing to do. So our hope is as we're moving forward that these 4 basic measures will allow for us to set goals out in the future and then be able to aim at them and understand when we need to pivot, when we need to change course, and be able to also articulate to the public, as well as this board of directors and our employees, what trade-offs we're making in order to, and so that you can have a very rational discourse. To that end, the importance of those four basic measures of value, community, environmental, financial, and customer, is that what they do is they set alignment throughout our entire organization. We put together an objective and key results performance-based program for our employees. Basically what that does is it allows for us to tell 2,000 people what to do day in and day out to drive the value of the organization forward. And it does allow for myself to be able to communicate with City Council and the public at large to help them understand exactly where we're headed. Ms. Lee Johnson has taken the initiative of working with myself and the rest of the team at reorganizing the total compensation for the entire company. I'm a big believer in going first, and the reality is that one way to avoid a trend line like we've seen in the past 10 years, which is a loss of $500 million in top line sales compared to expectations, around $250 million in free cash flow, is to align your employees towards what actually is driving value. And so I applaud this board, and I will tell you it will be a significant challenge as a public entity of designing an incentive program that truly drives the value of JEA forward for the customer and the community and aligns employees' actions with results. And by the way, I know this is a bit of a presentation, but you were all a part of this as well. So to the extent there's a discourse or you'd like to insert your own comments, feel free.
So the third priority that Aaron outlined was de-risking the business. So central to our de-risking efforts this year was the Strategic and Timely Asset Realignment, or our STAR plan. This plan increases operating efficiency and accelerates debt paydown. We executed the first phase of the plan last month with the early payoff of $195 million of debt. As part of the plan, we increased the capacity on our revolving line of credit to $500 million, which continues to provide an excellent source of liquidity. We'll maintain AA financial credit metrics. The pay down of the debt will increase free cash flow by an average of $80 million per year over the next 5 years, which will allow us to pay down $1 billion of debt by 2023 and provide cash funding for $1.9 billion of CapEx over the same time period, which is a 40% increase over the prior 5-year period. These are all with no base rate increases necessary to execute on the plan.
That's incredible, by the way.
It is.
It's a testament to I think it's a testament to the planning team and what we have in terms of the ability to execute. We're also de-risking our fuel and environmental risk through the substantial increase in solar generation. We wrapped up contracts for 250 megawatts of additional solar PV power purchase agreements that will be online by 2022. These agreements, in combination with our current agreements, will make Jacksonville the largest solar city in the U.S. Not only is this good for the environment and our community, but it makes good financial sense. The cost of the power from these PPAs is less than our current fuel rate, and it locks in the pricing for more than 20 years with no escalator. So these will reduce our exposure to fossil fuel volatility and act as a long-term price hedge. Next, we created a stable operating environment through 2023. We extended the term of the existing contribution agreement to 2023 on the same terms and conditions. In addition, we committed to provide additional water quality trading credits to the city, as well as provide an additional $15.1 million for septic tank phase out and river level monitoring equipment. Finally, JEA's Enterprise Risk Management Program has been in place for 12 years and is really the gold standard for public power. We led the effort to craft the Large Public Power Council's ERM guidelines, and we continually work to improve our program. Over the past year, we worked with Board Member Flanagan and the rest of the Finance and Audit Committee to reevaluate all of our top corporate risks. And we've systematically reassessed and rescored our risks to better prioritize these risks relative to one another and to better assess reputation impact of a risk event.
So with priority 4, it's becoming a platform of customer choice. And so I'd like to invite some of the senior leadership up to talk to you a little bit about how we're thinking about this initiative.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm Julio Romero. I'm the Chief Innovation and Transformation Officer. It's a pleasure to be here. As it was discussed this morning in this meeting and in previous meetings, our industry is changing, and it's changing very fast. A key component of those changes is the evolving expectations of our customers, specifically the adoption of new and emerging technologies. We talked this morning about solar generation. There are other components, the adoption of electric vehicles, energy efficiency, energy storage. So JEA has recognized those evolving patterns, consumption patterns, and we are proactively addressing these areas. This morning, my colleagues are going to talk about a few concepts that we are exploring. They include demand rates, they include electrification, purification, water purification, power production using renewable gas, biogas, and others. So let me introduce Carrie Stewart and Daryl Cahoon.
Well, good morning, everyone. Wanted to talk real quickly about the demand rate study, and thank you very much for approving the new rate structures going forward into this 5,000-person pilot that we'll be embarking upon starting in June. Our customers will be receiving communications starting in April, so just next month. But if you take a look at the slide before, you'll see how far we've come. The first rate design working group met in 2014, and I don't need to remind you, it's 2019, and we're well past 5 years from starting to think about this, from going through focus group testing, weather stress testing just at the end of last year, to really prepare ourselves for this pilot going forward. And again, what this does is it helps with rate stabilization, but it really establishes a platform for customer choice. And so we're looking forward to the pilot this summer. We'll keep you up to date as we move along. One of the things we're very excited about, and we have lots of other companies around the country, as I've told you before, watching us as we move forward into rolling out this demand rate. But the enabling technology is really the exciting piece. This technology does not currently exist, and so we are building it with technology partners in the industry to try to come up with the best way for our customers, again, to choose how they manage their own home energy systems. Right now, you've seen this slide before. I've showed it to you. We're struggling in this area a little bit. Again, it's very new technology, trying to integrate it with all of our existing technology that is attached to the home via a meter, technology on the other side of the meter that our customers purchase on their own, and trying to integrate all of that to allow all of the technologies that we have to enable our customers to make smart choices about what they do in their home and how they use energy in their home. We've got some connectivity issues right now going on, but we hope to iron those out. That's what the pilot's for. So again, to Melissa and Ryan's and Aaron's point, don't want to tell you that everything's going great. We've got some struggles, but we have plans in place to make sure that we execute through the summer on behalf of those customers in the pilot program. We talked at the end of last year about electrification. Julio mentioned it. This is incredibly exciting for us on the customer side, for those in the finance department, especially Ryan's very happy about this one. You may remember that in late last year, we presented to you about electrification. And if you'll remember, electrification is simply shifting from the use of non-electric energy, primarily fossil fuels, to electricity for the final consumption of whatever use of the product that you're using. And further to electrification, we want to make sure that it's beneficial electrification. And I can't stress this enough. It's required that it be cost-effective for JEA, good for all customers, whether they participate in electrification initiatives or not, and good or at least neutral to the environment. So embarking on this electrification program is significant for us and for our customers, but it has to be beneficial in all of those areas for us to make those decisions. We will have a report coming out in April. We keep trying to tease out from our partners at ICF even a range of what we can expect in terms of additional revenue and additional environmental value for our customers. But we're waiting to see right now. That report should be out in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be reporting back to this board probably from an informational standpoint, the report itself, so that you can get an idea of what we're going to be embarking upon as we move forward in the next year.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So you'll remember from last month we discussed moving from a very linear look at water and resources and to more of an integrated approach, and so that's what this slide is showing here. Our integrated water resource plan is both supply and quality well into the year of 2050. We're really looking for the next generation of our customers. And unlike energy, you can't buy from the market, so we have to get water right. We want to be out in front. And so we want to lead thinking here regarding not only supply and quality, but also resource recovery. Because if water follows the electric model or the energy model, we'll be looking at integrated sources and service models, and we want to be ready for that. And so there's no better example of resource recovery than the biosolids that our water reclamation facilities produce. You'll remember this slide from last month as well. Over the past year, we've really set the table for this initiative. It does truly touch each of our corporate measures of value. It's a public-private partnership for organics recycling, which we're calling a merchant organics recycling facility, or the MORF. And our vision is that we're going to replace our fertilizer pellet process at Buckman with a more green process. The MORF will reduce energy demand and landfill waste, and the product produced will have a greater opportunity for market share. And the bottom line for this is that it's going to reduce costs for our customers and for the city of Jacksonville. And since our last presentation, we have completed phase 1 of our evaluation process with proposers and JEA procurement. And so I noted that the MORF was a less energy-intense process, and by that I mean we'll avoid the purchase of roughly $500,000 per year in natural gas, and the methane that we produce in our digesters at Buckman will be available for greener purposes. We're currently looking at a biogas credit feasibility study to determine if the economics of both federal and state credits are there for the work. It would mean to take advantage of those credits, we would upgrade our biogas to purified renewable natural gas, or RNG, by removing impurities. And so if the economics work out, we will pump our RNG into a commercial natural gas pipeline. And regardless of the use that we end up with for our biogas, we're going to work to next optimize production from our digesters to maximize that resource. And so my last slide, we actually circle right back to water. And we've laid out a 3-phased approach to consider one alternative supply, water purification. In phase 1, we successfully tested 2 technologies at 2 of our water reclamation facilities. In phase 2, we'll be building a demonstration facility beginning in fiscal 20 for public engagement and education. And then following the integrated water resource plan output, we will potentially move to phase 3, which would be commercial production of purified water. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl.
Let me close this part of the presentation by saying that these are examples of some of the technologies that we are exploring and planning to explore. Now, this journey is not an easy one. It's a challenging one. As we evolve and we become a digital utility, a utility that relies on the utilization of real-time data, automation, control technologies, we need to get ready to address these challenges. So as part of this transition, we recently recruited a talented new team member that I would like to introduce. Sean Eads is our new CIO. Sean? So we would like to welcome Sean to the team. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Julio. Mr. Zahn?
Sure. I think if there was one word that maybe got repeated more times than that was technology. It shows you that very similar to the cell phone disrupting the old wireline telecom industry that not only while the energy business is probably 10 to 15 years ahead, you're starting to see very similar scale down and modularization on the water and the wastewater side. And, as Daryl, I'd like to reiterate something Daryl said, you can't buy clean water on an open market. And, so the risk of not being the leader is significantly greater on the water side than on the energy side. On the energy side, there's often a benefit to a wait and see to see what works and what doesn't to be able before you adopt. On the water side, you need to be, leading on the research and development because clean water, both for potable consumption as well as for recreation, is critical. And once you lost it, it's very expensive to get back on that power curve. And if you need any examples, you can really look around the state of some cities that had an issue with that. And actually, if you've lived in Jacksonville in 1997, you can actually reflect relatively well on that as well. So with that end, the 10-year strategic plan, step one really began during the transition. Measure what matters. If you're a carpenter, measure twice, cut once, right? Mm-hmm. And so the issue is that we created a guiding principle with a vision and mission statements that were around four basic fundamental values that the entire community could agree on, and they could agree that they were value that we should increase going forward. The second, and one of the things that I'm going to skip a little bit, but there's been a methodical approach to not only attracting Class A talent, but organizing them in the way that we need to have them organized in order to be able to move forward. I'm happy to report that not only can JEA retain Class A talent, which we've proven in the years past, but we can still and are actively recruiting Class A talent. To that end, Herschel Vineyard, who is the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection for the entire state of Florida, will be joining us next week as our Chief Administrative Officer. And he will be assuming control over the compliance, legal, customer relationship, stakeholder affairs organizations, environmental, and also Lynn Rohde, who is also joining us as our new VP legal officer, has a phenomenal past in environmental and natural resource practices as well as commercial and transactional experience, and we're very excited to have her on board. To that end, you've also met Karen Anders in the past. You know Carrie Stewart very well. Melissa and Ryan and Mike Hightower and Sean Eads, your senior leadership team has been filled out and is organized in four basic fundamental buckets. Number one, take care of the customer today. And that's Melissa's charge. And there's no coincidence that the culture element is a priority for her. Why? Because our employees are the ones that take care of the customer, and so it's her charge to not only drive culture, and obviously we're all a part of it, as board and as the CEO as well, but it's to take care of the customer today, because we cannot mess up on delivering reliable, affordable energy and water and wastewater services. The second, and Julio talked a little bit about this, is thinking about how do you take care of the customer tomorrow. And that's not only how do you provide service, but also how does the customer want the service. The days of satisfied customers being enough are probably over. We need to go beyond thinking about customer satisfaction. That ought to be the minimum bar entry level for us, and start thinking about how do we shape the customer's view and be the trusted partner that we can be. Certainly, a lot of what we get published in the newspaper and what we talked about in the last year is being fiscally responsible. So, being able to pay off an additional $1 billion of debt while also maintaining liquidity is not robbing the pig bank. It's doing what companies do when they're facing negative trends on sales. It's the right thing to do. Monetizing non-core assets like real estate and thinking about telecom as a non-core asset allows for your senior leadership team to be refocused. So Ryan's charge is to continually maintain a lever on fiscal responsibility and risk management. And the last, which Herschel is really going to be, and his team will be charged with, is maintaining this open communication. Certainly, we don't need to hide from it. There's always been a past where JEA has been viewed as being tight-lipped, close to the vest, and not always having been as transparent as it should have been. And we've taken a lot of steps in the last year in terms of board agendas, and the way we've structured these meetings, the subject matter explorations, the proactive communications to customers and to our city council members and to our mayor, and actually reaching out to news organizations to help talk through difficult issues. We plan on continuing that and getting, not only continuing it, but getting better at it. And so, with that, the next step generally in a path is once you've agreed on how you measure what matters, and you've got the right people in the right seats, is you start to agree on what is the process that you're going to use to move forward. Just a reminder, we are really only at step 2. It's a journey. It's a long journey at that, because we want to measure twice and cut once. And to that end, the next step is really, how do you measure the baseline? Because looking out in the future, one of the things that JEA has never done is produce a management case forecast. We have resource planning forecasts, we have rate planning forecasts, we have rating agency forecasts, all forecasts for multiple different means and methods. But we have not said, what does the business look like on a status quo? We measured the first step in that was measuring our organizational health, really taking a look in the mirror and being able to acknowledge, what does our organizational health look like and how do we move forward? The second step is really going to be measuring what does the financial forecast look like on a status quo baseline. That'll allow for our employees and our community to really understand, the impacts of demand rate, the impacts of electrification, the impacts of distributed generation, the impacts of our integrated water resource plan, and why those are critical. And those aren't just financial forecasts, they tend to also involve operational metrics around them. Our hope is to have that complete sometime by May, so that we can share it with the board and be able to have a conversation of what does the world look like along the status quo. And to that end, once you know what the status quo looks like, then you can start to design strategic initiatives that create long-term goals that you can migrate you away from what the status quo looks like. And one of the questions that I don't think has ever been discussed is, what does the community want JEA to look like in 2030 and 2050? We certainly, as a management team, have a view. You see us taking actions around resource recovery, affordable rates, focus on JSEP spending and nutrient discharge to the river, air emissions. But there's an element of we need to agree on what does JEA do in order to not only drive economic value for the city in terms of economic development and recruiting companies, creating jobs, and helping education, but also in terms of customer value. So our hope is that when we're done with this process, that we have a strategic plan with steps that look out into the future, that is clear, it articulates it in alignment with the vision and the mission that this board has agreed with, and that our management team and employees have all had an opportunity to weigh in, which I'll even stop there. If you think about the guiding principles, we gave all 2,000 employees, and I see Valerie Gutierrez, our union leaders, the opportunity to weigh in and have their say on what the vision, mission, and guiding principles of the organization look like. We're trying to be inclusive. We plan on continuing it, and when we publish a plan, our hope is that we'll have a set of strategic initiatives that have the community buy-in, this board's buy-in, and ultimately maximize those 4 corporate measures now and in the future, and is clear and articulate. And last but not least, these are the deliverables that you should expect. We will also, as with any strategic plan, it's not always a rosy picture. You have to identify the risks and the hurdles that are in the way to being able to achieve your vision. And so we'll be spending quite a bit of time on that as well. I really do, well, I think I'm about 3 months in as the permanent CEO. I want to thank you for a year of what I think has had some stressful times, and perhaps this is a really good opportunity for me to say thank you very much to the chair. You have been a partner on a number of very difficult issues, and we have a gift for you to thank you for your service. I will tell you, Ms. Green, careful in terms of how much time. I think we were talking 9 o'clock last night, so it tends to be 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. or even midnight sometimes. But thank you so much, Chair, for your time.
Thank you. No, not. Leave it there. Yes. Thank you. Well, that was unexpected. I appreciate that. That was a information-dense and rich presentation from you and the entire senior leadership team. Thank you for the effort that went into that. I'd like to pause and just see if there are any questions from the board regarding the presentation. I'll start on this side. Ms. Flanagan.
No questions, but great appreciation to Aaron and the senior leadership team. Very, very informative, and happy to see the direction of innovation here at JEA.
Thank you. Reverend Newbill.
Yeah, I think to add the idea part is really forward-looking, because if you don't think futuristically, you kind of get stuck where you are. So I want to commend you. And I heard that from the beginning, even before you became permanent CEO. That was your ideology, was always to deal with the future before it got there.
Yeah, there's some words that have actually been banned in this building, which are, that's how we've always done it. You're not allowed to say that anymore.
Good.
That can't ever be the rationale there has to be a good rationale on how we move forward.
Good. Ms. Green.
Just to echo, great job. But one thing's for sure, it makes it exciting to be a part of this board and looking forward to the future. So congratulations to you as well as the entire senior leadership team.
Yes. Ms. Johnson.
Same sentiment. The overall compilation of everything's very assertive. It's very poignant in the direction you want to go. I'm looking forward to it. It's exciting for me. Certainly being a part of the board, but just seeing the maturation, even myself over the last 6 months, of how everything's come together. So hats off to you and the team. Very good job. I look forward to being a part of it. No questions for me.
No questions. I'll just echo those sentiments. It's been an incredible year. As I looked at the first couple of slides with the timeline, every month had something momentous. And so that's a lot of added work on top of your daily jobs, and the entire team contributed to that effort. Again, just astounded at how much has been done in a short period of time. Congratulations and thank you for all that hard work. So, great presentation.
Yeah, I'd say the senior leadership, certainly emerging out of the year of 2017 and moving into 2018, and the stress they were moving through under that conversation, had a Herculean effort this year, and not only dealing with their own personal circumstance, because let's not kid ourselves, reorganizing your org chart is stressful for individuals by themselves. But continuing to keep an eye on the mission and where we're going and really coming together as a team, they really need to be applauded. So I really thank you all for your efforts, and I look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the Finance and Audit Committee report. Ms. Flanagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's certainly a tough act to follow, but I do want to keep the rest of the board apprised of the activities of the Finance and Audit Committee, which has just recently met. We went through fiscal year 2020 budget assumptions. We received JEA Annual Disclosure Policy Report, as well as the Quarterly Audit Services Update, the Ethics Officer Quarterly Report. Within Treasury, we received the Electric System and Water and Sewer System Reserve Fund Quarterly Report, as well as the STAR Plan Early Debt Retirement Phase 1 Update. We also heard the Investment Policy Revision, which is an action item that I'll come back to, as well as JEA Energy Market Risk Management Policy Report. There is a second action item around program assessment that I'll come back to for the board's benefit, and announce that our next Finance and Audit Committee meeting would take place on May 20th. So the first of two action items is the investment policy revision, which management recommends, as you'll have had an opportunity to read. It suggests a limit for intergovernmental pools to be revised from 15% to 20%. What this does is, as the investment portfolio has decreased, essentially the denominator in the equation has decreased, revising the permitted allowance from 15 to 20% allows JEA to maintain the same dollar amount. So that is the recommendation of the Finance and Audit Committee brought before the full board for approval.
Are you submitting that as a motion from the committee?
Yes.
So we have a motion from the Finance and Audit Committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Reverend Newbill. Any questions or discussion for Ms. Flanagan? Do you want to restate the motion?
This motion would be in line with management's recommendation to revise the JEA investment policy to provide for intergovernmental pools limit to be revised from 15 to 20%.
Any discussion, questions? No. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. The second and final action item from Finance and Audit Committee is around the program assessment that was presented by Mr. Hobson. This is an item related to cybersecurity, which is protected under Sunshine, and all of the board members have had an opportunity to receive the full scope of work and review, inquire of the management team if there's any questions. That is also brought forward on the recommendation of the Finance and Audit Committee for full approval by the board.
So I'll take that as a motion to authorize the board chair to finalize and approve a direct contract with E&Y to provide a written report consisting of a comprehensive, independent, detailed assessment of JEA's cybersecurity program. Is there a second? Reverend Newbill, thank you. I hope everyone had an opportunity to review that. It came across confidentially. Any questions regarding the engagement of E&Y for these services?
No.
No. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. We are now up to committee reports, nominating committee. We had an opportunity to meet a few weeks ago, and I am pleased to report that the nominating committee has submitted as a slate of officers for the coming year, Ms. Green as board chair, Ms. Johnston as vice chair, and the Reverend Newbill to continue as secretary. So those are the nominations from the nominating committee. I would ask for a motion to approve that and elect those officers.
So,
thank you, Reverend Newbill. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Flanagan. Any questions or discussion regarding the slate of officers for the coming year? I'm going to rush this to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great. Any opposed, nay. Mr. Zahn.
So to clarify, and Ms. Green's first meeting would be the end of April.
That's correct.
It would be when she would assume.
April's term commences in April.
Yes.
Yes.
Intermonth.
Perfect timing.
Next regular board meeting. Now we're up to other business, old business. Any old business to come before the board? Any new business to come before the board? Opportunity for open discussion among the board members on any matters of interest. I'll throw out a couple of items. I had the privilege of attending the rating agency meetings last month or beginning of this month with Mr. Zahn, Ms. Dykes, Mr. Wanamaker, and is Joe here? Yeah, Mr. Orfano, thank you. I will say that the presentations went very well, and I was impressed with the intellect and insight of the Fitch representatives particularly, and their evaluation of JEA. and maintaining their strong ratings. It was apparent to me that Moody's and S&P struggled to justify their rationale for last year's downgrades and continue to do so in the face of, as you've seen today, overwhelmingly strong performance by JEA on both the electric and the water wastewater side. I'm not sure that I expect them to change their opinion based on those meetings, but we can remain cautiously optimistic that they will open their eyes and see that JEA is stronger now than it ever has been before. So that was really good meetings. We have a board meeting set for next week, April 2nd, to consider the headquarters decision. So I know that several board members already met with our internal staff and CBRE. Invite you to consider that very carefully. It will be a significant decision in the life of this company. I have spoken to Mr. Zahn, and I want to follow up on something I had said at our last board meeting. We've now received final and best offers from each of the three bidders. Although Florida law allows us to sit on that information for a period of time that would extend beyond our meeting next week, I've asked that he direct staff to release that information to the public so the public will have an opportunity to review and comment on that. I think we'll try and get that out this week so that everybody will have an opportunity. Yes, Kerry Stewart's indicating that will happen. So the public will have an opportunity to review that and evaluate those bids and comment on it prior to and at our meeting next week. So that's coming up then. Any other items for open discussion there? And I'll turn it to Mr. Zahn for, I don't know what's left to say. You said a lot already.
I just want to commend again the senior leadership team for all the efforts you've put in really pivoting the business. I know we have a long way to go, but I really do appreciate all of your efforts, your team's efforts, and look forward to the next year.
Great. Chair's report. For those of you who are paying attention, we've elected Ms. Green to take my place here starting next month, so that means this is my last meeting to preside as chair. So I'll exercise a point of privilege.
You still get April 2nd.
I get April 2nd. Well, it's the last regular board meeting, and I won't distract from that meeting. So I will exercise a point of privilege for a couple of remarks. First of all, I would like to thank all of my fellow board members for their tireless dedication and service to JEA. It takes a lot of time and effort, and I can't tell you over the last 3 years how many people have come up to me and expressed surprise that this is an unpaid position. I think they assume that if you're on the board of a multi-billion-dollar operation that you're getting compensated for it. But this is not a private company. It's a municipal utility. And so the people sitting beside me and the other board members now and in the past give untold hours. And they do so at the expense of their business and their personal lives and their family and time that would otherwise be spent with them. So I am humbled and grateful for the time that you give to JEA and to our community. I'd also like to thank Mr. Zahn, his predecessor, Mr. McElroy, Ms. Dykes, and the entire senior leadership team, current and past members of the SLT. You've been very patient with me. You've answered my occasionally dumb questions. You have educated me and increased by infinite measure my knowledge and understanding of a very complex organization and utility. So thank you to each and every one of you for that. I'm not going to recap the last 18 months of my tenure, the most significant milestones of which have already been touched on by Mr. Zahn and his team. I am going to briefly comment on three areas. The privatization discussion, no mic drop moments a la Mr. Petway here, the leadership transition, and the Plant Vogel issue. Because I think that those three have commanded outsized amount of attention over the last 18 months and have been disruptive in different ways to JEA. Certainly the privatization discussion was painful and distracting for our team and our employees. Like many painful events that we encounter in life, I think some good comes from that. It was noted at the time that this issue's come up many times in the past and will probably come up again. I hope that if it does come up again in the future, that our community will be better informed and better equipped to confront the issues than it was in the past as a result of the discussions that were held last year. While painful, I hope that some good can come of that. The leadership transition was also a difficult transition. Mr. Zahn was criticized. This board was criticized for selecting him as CEO. I will tell you that I stand by that decision. I think that the board, time will prove this board made the right decision. He's led a number of significant initiatives, most of which we've heard about today, all of which I think lead to the betterment of the utility. I particularly look forward to seeing what he and his ACE team have in store for the future. Plant Vogtle will be a burden, as was mentioned earlier in today's presentation. There's been a lot of criticism leveled at this board and the senior leadership team for tackling that issue head-on. I will tell you that that is a problem that was inherited by the current senior leadership team and board. It's not an issue that we sought out, but it's not one that we shrunk from either. We've confronted those issues. We continue to deal with them in a very positive way, continue to seek commercial solutions to the litigation that remains pending. And I will say that I am cautiously optimistic that that will be resolved in a way that is favorable to JEA and its customers. So I look forward to the resolution of that. Enough said about those issues. This is a dynamically changing industry, both on the electric, water, and wastewater sides. It is not your grandfather's utility. We will face many challenges at JEA in the years to come, but when I look at the senior leadership team that you've assembled, I'm confident that Mr. Zahn and that team will be up to the challenge that is brought. So as I step away from the board in the next couple of months, I look forward to watching how you guys deal with and conquer those challenges. So very exciting time for me. Thank you. Again, I appreciate your support and service, and thank you to the board and to the staff. Anything else? We stand adjourned. Thank you.